for your classmates who have or cannot attend in this class today. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for this afternoon you've given to us. Thank you, Lord, for blessings you have showered upon us. Guide us today, Lord, as we discuss matters about gender and sexuality, Lord God, and Lord, please give us wisdom, understanding, and strength, Lord, and may it be, Lord God, that you will be glorified, Lord, in this class, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, sige, so let's now start our class. Are you ready na group 4?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma-start na kami, ma'am.
Okay, sige. Kindly take over for a while. Sige. I will just thank you. Sige na,
Okay,
you may
ma'am,
start
thank
na.
you. Good afternoon, everyone. So before we formally start with our today's topic, let's have first our energizer. So, JF, next slide, please. So for our game mechanics for this afternoon, all participants are encouraged to open their camera and unmute themselves. If it's okay sa inyong internet connection or for those who are able to open their camera. So proceed. So the class is given a set of rumbled words and some picture to help them in guessing the correct words. Okay. And then just kindly raise your hand if you think you know the correct answer and wait until I call your name to be recognized. Okay? So are we all clear? So we will have the prizes after this. Okay? Next slide, please. For the round 1. So are you now ready, guys? Ready na pa? Hello?
Ready.
Okay, thank you, Divine.
Ready.
Thank you, Sineto. Okay. Next slide, JF. So we have here a rainbow flag with the people along the street. Yes, Danny, you are recognized. Yes, Dan, proceed.
Pride March.
Pride March. Is this the correct answer, JF? Next slide. Okay, so si Danny ang aton nga first winner for the round 1. So we have here the Pride March. Next round, for round 2, we have this man in pink, girl in blue with the access ang equipments. Yes, sinong una? Liwat me, guys. Wala nag-notify. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Raise your hand. Yes, Miss Jubilee, you proceed. Ano correct answer?
Gender role.
Gender role. So, gender role ba lang correct nga answer? And yes, Juby. Since Juby ang aton nga second winner. Next slide for round 3. For round 3, we have these two couple. Yes, Mikey.
Same sex.
Same sex. So it is 2 words. So next. Yes, it is correct. Si Mikey ang aton nga second winner. Okay, wait. For the round 4 and 5, so please be ready. You can unmute yourselves. I will no longer call your name, guys. So pauna-una na lang na hambal sang correct nga word or words. Okay, for round 4, next slide. We have
Gender stereotypes.
Miss Olata. So si Miss Olata ang una. Okay? And last slide, last round na kita, guys.
Gender identity.
Fluidity.
Ano? Si Kes.
Gender fluidity.
Ano, Kes?
Gender
fluidity.
Utod kay net eh. So si Kes ang ating winner for the round 5. So congratulations everyone. Each of you will receive a 10 pesos worth of GCash or load. Thank you, guys. JF, you can now take over.
All right. So, have you ever wondered about your private parts, your FF and your ET? Would you agree that what's between your legs cannot define who you really are? Today, we are going to talk about a very interesting and controversial topic. Together with Group 4, Milen Grace Kabila, Shaina Calmita, Mary Kate Pauline Colorado, Victor de Madara, and yours truly, JF David, join us as we celebrate our true self as we journey to the you in you, to the colors of the psychology of gender and sexuality. So to start with, we have Mary Kate Pauline Colorado to talk about the introduction, history, and the overview of psychology of gender and sexuality.
Hi, good morning guys. So I hope na-energize ka mo sa pag-games and makapamati ka mayo. So I'll discuss the introduction, history, and then the overview of psychology of gender and sexuality. So gender and sexual identity plays a very significant role in the lives of developing youth. The developments of gender and sexuality are shaped by a variety of factors, including but not limited to biological, cognitive, social elements, but both sexuality and gender identity spectrums are continuing to expand. So to start, um, as we have been talking about sex, we have been creating art, writing, and talking about it. Some of the earliest recovered artifacts from Asian cultures are thought to be fertility totems. So first is we have the example of sexual artifact. We have the Hindu Kama Sutra. It's an Asian text discussing love, desire, pleasure, includes also how-to manual for having sexual intercourse. So not just that, it also have rules, advice, and story about sex are also contained in the Muslim Quran, the Jewish Torah, and the Christian Bible. So, by contrast, people have been scientifically investigating sex, but it was just been for 125 years only. But the first scientific investigation of sex employed the case study of method of research. So before we go to Sigmund Freud, first we have Mr. Henry Havelock Ellis. So he examined a diverse topic within sexuality, including arousal and masturbation during 1897 to 1923. His findings were published in a 7-volume set of books titled Studies of Psychology of Sex. Noteworthy findings is that transgender people are distinct from homosexual people. So let's go to Sigmund Freud, the first scientist to link sex to healthy development, recognize humans as being sexual throughout their lifespan, including childhood. And he introduces the 5 stages of psychosexual development. So before we proceed, who among you still remember? We have discussed it since we were freshmen. The 5 stages of psychosexual development. So do you guys still remember it, or may nakadumdum pa sa inyo kung anong 5 stages of sexual development? Okay, so wala Mikey, anal, phallic, oral, latency, and genitalia. So yes, correct. Thank you, Mike. So let's go to the evolutionary. Alfred Kinsey first. So the father of human sexuality research, he believed that sexual knowledge was the product of guesswork and had never really been studied systematically or in an unbiased way. He interviewed 18,000 people using survey methods. So next, evolutionary of psychology of gender. Thank you. So early years, this is pre-1960s, were characterized by androcentric bias, the omission of marginalization of women and women's issue. So next is we have the compensatory years. This involved 1960s and 1970s, fueled by the second wave of feminist activism, marked by a focus on neglected foremothers, It's also the demonstration and correction of previous sexist biases, a shift in emphasis from women to gender. Okay, so sex. So distinguishing property, quality, or assemblage of properties by which organisms are classified male, female, or intersex on the basis of their reproductive organs and function. While sexuality is people's sexual interest in attraction to others, their capacity to have erotic experience and responses. While gender refers to the cultural, social, and psychological meanings that are associated with masculinity and femininity. So first, if we have next slide. Thank you. So the cultural variation of gender first. So characteristic of gender may vary greatly between the different societies. So for example, in American culture, it is considered to wear a dress or skirt. However, in many Middle Eastern, Asian, and African culture, dresses or skirts are often referred to as sarongs, robes, gowns, or can be considered masculine. So, all of you is familiar with Harry Styles, right, from One Direction, childhood crush. So he is known to be fond of wearing skirts or feminine clothes, but it doesn't make him less masculine. So, social construction of gender, we have gender norms. It is a social acceptable ways of acting gender. So I learned from birth to childhood socialization. So we noticed that while we're growing up, so they're considered like girls are expected to play dolls, boys are expected to play tracks, and also if it's a baby girl, pink, red. If it's a baby boy, it is usually blue or green. So there's a lot of gender norms that we have been experienced while we're growing up. So sometimes it affects what we really want in life with people or the society expect us to be. So okay, next is we have the masculinity. So it's a broad set of concepts which include gender relation and gender practices between men and women, and the effects of those practices embedded in the experience, personality, and culture. So several masculinities apart in any culture is first is the homogenic. So homogenic it legitimized the domination of men in society. Emotionless, very white, and then their strength. Well, second about it is we have the subordinate. It is the opposite of the homogenic, which means that it is less masculine, more feminine under action, and also it's very emotional and not being heterosexual. Next, as we have the complicit masculinity. It refers to the man who admires or do not challenge the homogenic. And lastly, the marginalized masculinity refers to the lack of characteristic to be called as homogenic masculinity. So, femininity. The social construction perspective on gender explores the taken for granted assumption about what it means to be male, female, feminine, and masculine. There are, however, dominant ideals of doing femininity which favor white, heterosexual, middle class, who are been able-bodied. Minority women do not enjoy the same privileges in comparison. Next is we have transgender. So we can I think all of us can agree that transgender people face really various gender inequalities. For example, their lack of access to adequate healthcare, their high rates of experiencing mental illness as a result of family rejection, bullying, and social exclusion, and they really face high rates of sexual harassment. So I know a transgender, and it's a really hard thing for her or him. Actually, we always ask him or her what would be the pronouns, and it will be discussed later on about the pronouns. But some of the struggle being a transgender, even on the comfort room, they don't have a freedom to use where they are comfortable with. For example, if they will go to the men's room, men will criticize them. Same with the women's room. So that is one of the reason why they face high rates of sexual harassment. So most of them ends up having a mental illness, due to family rejection, and then social exclusion. They feel alone most of the time. But I'm really happy that we discussed about this kind of topic. So at least it represents that we're already accepting that transgender is really part of the gender and the sexuality. So next slide, please. So gender roles are well established social construction that they may be changed from culture to culture anytime. So for example, in American culture, gender roles is commonly taught in terms of gender stereotypes, beliefs, and expectations people hold out about the typical characteristics, preferences of behaviors of men and women. So for example, for the gender roles, for example, for the boys and girls earlier that I already talked about, some of it is that boys should engage in sport, while sometimes if they will engage in creative stuff, they will be labeled, as a less masculine. And boys and men are expected to use violence to show their manliness. But if you're not showing violence, you are one of the targets for bullying for men. And then also, really, while I'm reading and researching about it, the really sad thing about it, some people say that there's something wrong with women who doesn't want children. But if you're a woman who wants children and focus on your children, they will say that you are dependent with your husband. But some people will tell you that if you're a woman, you should stay at your home, be a housewife, and and the sad thing about it, earlier, way back on our history, women are expected just to be women. But now, we can say that in the earlier days, doctors should be men, nurses will be just girls. But we can say throughout these years, we have been more emphasizing that women can do the same thing what men can do, as long as also the lesbian and gay. So we are all equal as long as we believe that we are part of the society, even with all the criticism. So, okay, so we have the developmental introductory. But before that, have you wondered, guys? So, as our gender roles are stable part of our personality, we usually hold many gender stereotypes. So, when do we really start to learn about gender? Actually, it's very early, and I just noted after we researched. At the first birthday, children can distinguish faces by gender. By their second birthday, they can label others' gender and even sort objects into gender type categories. By the third birthday, children can consistently identify their own gender, and at this age, children believe sex is determined by their external attributes and not with the biological attributes. So, between 3 to 6 years of age, children learn that gender is constant and cannot be changed simply by changing their external attributes. So, having developed gender and constancy, during this period, children also develop strong and rigid gender stereotypes. So these stereotypes stay rigid until children reach about age of 8 or 9. So they develop their cognitive abilities that allow them to be more flexible, thinking about others. So for the development interview theory postulates that adults having focus on gender leads may lead children to pay attention to gender as a key source of information about themselves and others, to seek out any possible gender differences, and to form rigid stereotypes based on genders that are subsequently difficult to change. So my report ends here, and the next reporter will be Miss Milan Kabila, and she will discuss about the theories, gender congruence, gender stereotypes, and sexuality.
All right, thank you so much, Kate. So, good afternoon once again, everyone. So, at this period, we will now proceed to another theories in connection with one's gender. So, there are two theories that I will explain on how children from their gender roles after they learn to differentiate them. So, first, we have the gender schema theory. So, this was formally introduced by Sandra Bem in 1981 and argues that children are active learners who essentially socialize themselves. So in this case, Children actively organize others' behavior, activities, and attributes into gender categories, and these are known as schemas. So these led the children to perceive on which behavior is appropriate on their own. So for example, a young child watches her mother cooking over a period of time. This association soon becomes part of her schema, which she then begins to associate with her gender. This means that this young girl will be more interested in cooking and even view it as a feminine behavior, because for me she can always observe that inside their homes nga it is only her mother who cooks, and she cannot see that her father do these specific household chores. So she then is more likely to be interested and categorize herself to be like her mother as female. Now, we have here the four gender categories according by BEM's theory. So first, we have the sex type individuals. So they identify with the gender that corresponds to their physical sex. These individuals process and integrate information according to their schema for their gender. Hence, it is the alignment of their biological sex in determining the gender. So, for example, my physical sex is having a vagina, and this corresponds that my gender is female. Second, we have the cross-sex type individuals, in which they process and integrate information according to their schema through the lens of the opposite gender. Example, you are a female, and then in integrating the information that you are a female, you process or observe that the characteristic of a male individual. Like he is male because he does the fixing of equipment or having a bigger body structure. And you see that the opposite of it is having a smaller body structure. And you don't need to fix those huge equipment. And that's the time you confirm based on processing those information that your opposite sex to that sex is female ikaw because nag-observe ikaw nga ang opposite sex sa to ang male gaobra sang mga ulubrawon sang pambalay, fix ang equipment, and female wala nag-work. Next, for the third androgynous individuals process and integrate information based on their schema for both gender. Meaning, androgyny is a type of gender presentation that mixes masculinity and femininity. The word itself combines the two concepts, means that sometimes has both masculine and feminine characteristics. So sometimes they are referred to be as bi gender. Fourth, undifferentiated individuals, they have the difficulty in processing information based on any gender schema. These are individuals who score low on scales of masculinity and low on scales of femininity. Undifferentiated individuals tend to behave in an unpredictable, indistinct, or unsure manner. So in other words, they have an undifferentiated androgynous identity. So once again, guys, as a recap, what are the four gender categories according to BEM's theory? You can type it or you can unmute yourselves. Guys, am I
Sex
audible?
type individuals, cross sex type individuals, androgynous individuals, and undifferentiated individuals.
All right, thank you so much, Divine. So, gapamati sila ah. Next slide, please. So on our second theory, we have the very common, the social learning theory. So all of us are indeed familiar with this theory, and this was proposed by Albert Bandura. So this theory argues that gender roles are learned through reinforcement, punishment, and modeling. Children are rewarded and reinforced for behaving in concordance with their gender roles. And sometimes they are get punished for breaking gender roles. In addition, social learning theory argues that children learn many of their gender roles by modeling behavior of adults and older children. And in doing so, they develop ideas about what behaviors are appropriate for each gender. So under this theory, we have the observational learning. These consist of first watching, then imitating the behavior of another. Children observe the people around them, behaving in various ways, and some of which relate to their gender. So there are four stages of observational learning. We have the attention, the retention, the production, and lastly, the motivation. For the attention, an observer pays attention to another person's behavior. Second, for the retention, we have the observer stores the behavior in their memory. Third, for the production or the initiation, the observer must acquire the skills needed to reproduce the behavior. And lastly, motivation. The observer finds a reason to reproduce the behavior. So, for example, so within our homes, children tends to pay attention to the behavior of adults. Next, so from the time that a child sees his or her parent doing household chores, she or he gradually store this behavior. Third, this is the time when the child enables to perform his or her observed and stored behavior from his or her parents. He or she started to do the household chores that she or he often sees. Now, the child is provided with a positive reinforcement. This will serve as the motivation. They receive recognition or preferred reward after doing the household chores. And this will provide the child the motivation to keep on performing this kind of behavior. Next slide, please. Now, to further discuss our topic, I'd like to ask what comes in your mind when you hear the word congruent? Anyone?
Equal.
Yes, Divine, tama. What else? Ano pa sa iban, guys? Equal, ano pa meaning sa congruent? Kung mabatian nyo siya?
Guideline, tol.
Kaya ano?
Balance.
Balance. Okay. Okay. So, in geometry, two figures or objects are congruent if they have the same shape and size. So, according naman to Carl Rogers, congruence is a person's ideal self and actual experience that are consistent and very similar. Now, let's define what is gender congruence and psychology of gender. When we feel a sense of harmony in our gender, we are said to have a gender congruence. So we experience it. It takes the form of naming our gender such that it matches. It matches our internal sense of who we are, expressing ourselves through our clothing and activities, and being seen consistently by other people as we see ourselves. So, for example, I am a female and I express myself through doing household chores, wearing dress, and keeping myself presentable. And people around me consistently see my gender as female based on how I express it. And it is now congruent with who I am as an individual. So there is an harmony in my gender. I see myself as a female, I express myself as a female, and it is congruent with how people see me as a female. So when a person moves from a traditional binary view of gender to transgender, a gender or non-binary, they are said to experience transition and they find their congruence in gender. So what people or what we see as transition from moving from a specific gender to another is not actually transition. It is an alignment. So we tend usually to conclude that people from specific gender moves to another have undergone transition phase, but it is supposedly referred as an alignment. The individual's gender seek congruence across those dimensions, and they are trying to align themselves. Now, we have the identified harmony in experiencing alignment. So we have the social, hormonal, surgical, and legal. For social, it is the changing one's clothes, hairstyle, name, and or pronouns. So for social purposes. Second, for hormonal, we are using hormone blockers or hormone therapy or hormone enhancer to bring about physical, mental, or emotional alignment. Third, surgical, when gender-related physical traits are added, removed, or modified. Fourth, legal, it is changing one's birth certificate or driver's license. Next slide, please. So for our next topic, we have the gender stereotypes. Gender stereotypes are overgeneralizations about of characteristics, differences, and attributes of a certain group based on gender. So gender stereotypes create a widely accepted biases about certain characteristics, traits, or perpetuate the notion that each gender and associated behavior are binary. So for example, girls should play with dolls and boys should play with trucks. Next, a transgender or gender non-conforming person is profoundly wrong. Or in the Philippine context, gay or a gay are generalized to be salot sa lipunan. So, to clearly identify the different kinds of gender stereotypes, we have the following. First, personality traits. For example, women are often expected to be accommodating and emotional, while men are usually expected to be self-confident, aggressive. For domestic behavior, we have some people expect that women will take care of their children, cook, and clean the home, while men take care of finances, work on the car, and do the home repairs. Next, sa occupation, some people are quick to assume that teachers and nurses are women and that pilots, doctors, and engineers are men. Next, physical appearance. For example, women are expected to be thin, graceful, while men are expected to be tall and muscular. Women are also expected to dress and groom in ways that are stereotypically according to their gender. Next slide, please. Now, we are here in sexuality. Human sexuality is the way in which we experience and express ourselves as sexual beings. There are many factors that help develop our sexuality. Whether an individual is a male or female will likely have a major influence on the development of the individual sexuality. So we will base first the biological perspective. So when we say biological, it involves our hormones. So hormones may be viewed as one of the major driving force of sexual behavior. Hormones levels are usually correlated with sexual behavior. So there are some cases that we have these imbalance in our hormones and these affects one's sexuality. Second, in cognitive perspective, a comprehension of the processes of sexual arousal is an important element in understanding sexual responses. So according kay Wallen and Roth of 1987, they pointed out that perception and evaluation are the two major types of cognitive activity. That is how a stimulus or situation is interpreted, determiners of how the individual will respond to the stimulus. So we have here the three components, the detection, labeling, and attribution. For the detection, it is defined by which an individual's ability to note the presence of a stimulus or to discriminate it from another stimuli. So you identify, you detect what is that stimulus. Does it discriminate or does it present? It is present in the current situation. Next, labeling. It is the descriptor that an individual uses to categorize the stimulus event. Third, the attribution, in which explains the perception. So, the inability to detect these sexual stimuli, incorrect labeling, or misattribution may significantly impede sexual performance. So, this is important because this affects how we perceive these stimuli. Because an individual evaluates a sexual stimulus as good or positive, sexual arousal may be enhanced. Or on the other hand, when this stimulus is evaluated as negatively, then sexuality will be diminished. Next, for the learning perspective, learning theory focuses on environmental factors that shape behavior. Within this context, learning theory examines the environmental factors that shape sexual behavior. So our environment plays a vital role on how we learn, on how our sexuality is shaped and influenced. Next slide, please. Now, for the definition of terms, we have sexual orientation. This refers to the person's sexual attraction to others. Example, bisexual. People who are bisexual are romantically and physically attracted to the members of both sexes. Second, sexual identity. This describes the individual's own psychological perception of being male, female, neither, both, or somewhere in between. So it depends on them. Next, biological sex variation. This is the biological sex is limited into two categories of male and female. This can be, for example, for chromosomes, female is XX, male is XY. For reproductive organs, female have ovaries. For male, they have testes. For gender expression, this is one way of expressing one's gender. So this refers to the way we present our gender to the world, how a person chose the preferred haircut or makeup, so this can be a form of gender expression. Next, cross-dressing. This is subtype of transgenderism is cross-dressing, and this refers the act of wearing clothing typically associated with the other sex. So next slide, please. So for the next topic, we have Victor de Madara to present the sexual consent, the theoretical perspective of sexuality, and the gender fluidity.
Um, Thank you, my dear classmate. So, first we have the sexual consent. So, it refers to participation in a sexual act that is voluntary, conscious, and emphatic. Sexual consent is the foundation for normal, healthy behavior. Non-consensual sex, however, is unacceptable and unhealthy. So, when you involve yourself into sexual intercourse, there is a need to ask your partner if he or she is willing to do it. Kaya may mga cases nga iban daw gina-force ila partner biskan hindi willing, and that is unhealthy and labag sa kalooban nila. And for that, ma-fall siya sa non-consensual sex, which ginlabag personal opinions ng imo partner regarding for that action. So here are the things you need to consider and apply before involving in sexual intercourse. So first, we have the boundaries. One must know the limits and the preference of your partner for you to enable on what things are applicable for him or her and could not be ending to something not great. Next one is condoms. Condoms are a good type of contraception to use because they prevent both unwanted pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. Next is communication. It is really neat because since you need to interact with each other and misleading verbal cues and non-verbal cues could be misleading to something. Make sure that both sides understand what are the things to do and what are the plans according to what you have both discussed. Okay, sometimes in the heat of the moment, things can be deceiving. So pleasure, sexual behavior, and consent are interrelated. For consent is the foundation of sexual engagement, and emphatic consent requires sexual literacy, where the ability of your partner or you to effectively express each desires and limits and the respect of each other's boundaries. Next slide, please. So next we have the 6 theoretical perspectives of sexuality. First, we have psychoanalytic theory. For over the years, di ba, halin sang first year to fourth year na batian tagid ni sa. So, as a short recall, psychoanalytic theory, a psychological theory contains a basic assumption that part of human personality is unconscious. We have id, or the pleasure principle, and it is present sa pagbata sa aton. Siya ni gasugo sa isa ka tawo nga kung anong gusto mo dapat ara dayon para mag-gratify ang amon nga need as instant without considering any consequence. For example, sa grocery, kung may gusto ko nga baklon, pero hindi matag. Ang gusto mo matag dayon pero hindi. Amo na mamaoy ka kung ano man brown mo nga kasabad sa grocery. And ego is or the reality principle, siya niga-control between sa id and superego para mabalance ang actions or ga-serve as referee sa id and superego. So the superego or the moral compass, siya nigatag sa isa ka tao inner voice nga makonsensya ka tungod sa id nga gasugo simo. Second, we have the learning theory believes that much of human sexual behavior is learned. Ang amon nga theory is we learned sa mga role model nga ga-serve sa aton parents, brothers and sisters, and even sa mga nakita ta sa television. Under the learning theory, we have classical conditioning. Is the learning process in which a previously neutral stimulus is repeatedly paired with an unconditioned stimulus that reflexively elicits an unconditioned response. So also, Sigmund Freud go through a series of psychosexual stages that lead to the development of the adult personality. His theory described how personality developed over the course of childhood, and in each stage, a different erogenous zone is in focus. First, we have the oral stage, which lasts from birth to 1 year old, and at this stage, the mouth is the chief pleasure of the child, like sucking. Second is the anal stage, which part which part which start at the age of 1 to 3 years old, and the erogenous zone is the bowel and bladder control. And during this stage, children was started to toilet training. And for Freud, believed that positive experience during the toilet training stage served as the basis for people to become competent, productive, and creative adults. However, inappropriate parental responses can result in negative outcomes. If parent takes an approach that is too lenient, Freud suggested that an anal expulsive personality could develop in which the individual has a messy, wasteful, or destructive personality. And if parents are too strict or did begin toilet training too early, Freud believed that an anal retentive personality develops in which the individual is stringent, orderly, rigid, and obsessive. The third is the phallic stage. It start at the age of 3 to 6 years old, and genitals is the focus of the erogenous zone. At this age, children also begin to discover the differences between males and females. And at this stage, Freud believes that the boys begin to view their father as a rival for the mother's affection, or the Oedipus complex. This feeling of wanting to possess the mother and the desire to replace the father. And the term Electra complex has been used to describe a similar set of feelings experienced by young girls. Freud, however, believed that girls instead experience penis envy. Fourth is the latent stage. At the age range of 6 to puberty, the erogenous zone is sexual feelings are inactive. The stage begins around the time that children enter into school and become more considered with peer relationships, hobbies, and other interests. And the latent period is a time of exploring in which the sexual energy repressed or dormant. And the last is genital stage. The age range for this stage is from puberty to death, and the erogenous zone is maturing sexual interests. The onset of puberty causes the libido to become active once again. During the final stage of psychosexual development, the individual develops a strong sexual interest in the opposite sex. This stage begins during puberty but lasts throughout the rest of a person's life. And at this point, Freud believed that the ego and superego were formed and functioning. So, dapat ma-fulfill and magaan attention ang needs ng isa kabata para along the way hindi siya maka-experience ng maladaptive behaviors or serious mental problems. Eventually, the conditioned stimulus itself will evoke the response, like sa dog experiment ni Pavlov. Pag hunis ang bell, masalivate na ang dog, kay it knows there is food after. Same sa sexual arousal, kung makita isang sexy or vulgar nga person or porn ang sexual libido increase. Also, there is the operant conditioning, where it is the process of changing the frequency of a behavior, the operant, by following it with positive reinforcement or punishment. Dire may kondisyon nga matabo para makontrol ang certain behavior nga amo na. May punishments if ang certain behavior ga show undesired actions. On the other hand, may reward. Amo na ang ginahatag sa isa ka tawo if ga show ang desired behavior. And additionally, we have the social learning theory. It was based on principles of operant conditioning, but it also recognizes two other processes, the imitation and identification. So once a behavior is learned, the likelihood of its being performed depends on its consequences. If the behavior is not reinforced, the person will stop doing it. Successful experiences with the behavior over time will create a sense of self-efficacy. Next slide, please. Next slide po. So thirdly, we have social exchange theory. A theory based on the principles of reinforcement that assumes that people will choose actions that maximizes words and minimize costs. Social exchange theory views social relationship primarily as exchange of goods and services among people, where people participate in relationship only if they find that the relationship provide professional outcomes. So sa dire, dapat may mag-gain ang imo partner towards imo. It could be anything basta may mag-gain sila good outcomes. Under social exchange theory, we have the matching hypothesis. It happens when men and women will choose as mates people who match them on physical and social characteristics. So, where people who match will provide each other with similar rewards on dimensions such as attractiveness, social status, and wealth. Amo na like kung celebrity man mostly ilang ang mga partners. And kung mayaman sa mayaman man nilang partner. And kung less fortunate man nilang partner which is mostly may mga instances man nga iba. Like kung showbiz ang isa tao tapos non-showbiz, mangaranon kag imol. Gwapo kag gwapa kag hindi attractive. So fourth, we have the cognitive theory. Its basic assumption is that what we think influences what we feel. For cognitive psychologists, how we perceive and evaluate a sexual event make all the difference in the world. Since may kanya-kanya ta choices and experiences, ang partner preference and from that, ang opinions ng other people or the world will differ from your opinion. Fifth is the gender schema theory. Is it BEM's contention that all of us possess a gender schema, a cognitive structure comprising the set of attributes that we associate with males and females. For example, a traditional culture may maintain strict divisions between men and women, such that women are expected to take care of the household and raise children while men work outside the home and support the family. Children raised in such a culture will develop gender schema in line with that they observe, and through their schema will develop an understanding of what they can do as a boy or a girl. And lastly, we have the symbolic interaction theory. So, it is a theory based on the premise that human nature and the social order are products of communication among people. A person's behavior is constructed through his or her interaction with others. Sa mga friends, may mga symbolic meaning gid na kamo sa mga bagay-bagay. For example, may mag-aging nga tao, magtulokay lang kamo, mag-gets na diyon kay do may connection kamo, or if same kamo viewpoints sa certain issues or things. And if not, ikaw mismo ma-influence nila sang that certain person on what he or she believes in. And additionally, according to SIT, people can communicate successfully with others only to the extent that they ascribe similar meanings to objects and peoples. Amo na, mostly ang mag-friends, guess nila ang isa-isa biskan sa mga non-verbal cues lang. And under sang SIT, there is gender identity that may change over time or according to relational or psychological state, and also incorporates the feeling of not having a gender. That change might be in expression, but not identity, or in identity but not expression, or both expression and identity might change together. So a gender fluid person might identify as a woman one day and a man the next. Their gender might change quickly, in a matter of others, or slowly over months or over even years. But they do tamaan ka flexible sa ila gender, and it could be lifetime nga may changes, and they are sometimes describe themselves as gender fluid persons or persons. Next slide po. And the next reporter will be Shai Nakalmita, and go Shai.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So, I will be discussing first is the pronouns. So, pronouns are the most common way that people refer to one another outside of using proper names, or are the words used in place of proper name. So, we all know that even though in our English subject, we have been familiar with the word pronoun. So, in this topic, it was stated that pronoun is a common way to address someone based on their gender. So, why the word preferred doesn't apply to pronouns? So, preferences tend to indicate that one is choosing something, whereas identity is not a choice. So, if you look into the subject of pronoun used in the past, you have encountered the word preferred as a prefix to pronouns, as in the questions, what are your preferred pronouns? However, it's the best that this word is avoided when discussing pronouns. That's why ginhambal diri nga ang preferences mas may ginapili kita kaysa sa identity ng ara ng daan. Next. So these are the different examples of pronouns. So first is the she, her, hers, herself. So the usage of she, her pronouns is commonly associated with women. However, a person may choose to use she or her pronouns even if their gender is not female. So we all know nga gina-use ni naton to address sa mga babae But it says here's also nga pwede nga anyone can choose to call themselves she, her, hers, or herself. So next, second example of pronouns is the he, him, his, himself. So the usage of he, him pronouns is commonly associated with men, similar to how it shouldn't be assumed that someone who uses she or her pronouns is a woman. A person may use he and him pronouns without being a man. So same as goes sa men. Wait lang, bak. Okay, thank you. We all know nga gina-use ni ang he, him, his, himself sa mga lalaki, but it also says here nga anyone can choose to call themselves sang he, him, his, himself regardless of their sex. Next. Next is the they, them, theirs, and themselves. So there is a misconception that the usage of they, them personal pronouns is new, or that it is grammatically incorrect to refer to a singular human as they. Both of these notions are false. So in simple form, you cannot use this to a single person, and it also inclusive for all people, which means pwede siya or applicable siya sa tanan. Next. Now, new pronouns. So it is refers to pronouns that aren't officially recognized and are typically intended to be gender neutral, such as z, her, hers, a, em, and ni, nim, nis. So these mentioned words are in short applicable man siya sa tanan, and it is also gender neutral, though safe siya igamiton for tanan if i-address siya sa iban na tao. So, what to do if you misgender someone? So, if you made a mistake about a person's pronouns, employ the ACM method. So the ACM method is the apologize briefly, correct, and move on. So first, apologize briefly. So, amo na siya ang first step to take when you have referred to someone with the wrong pronouns is to acknowledge it. Doing so makes it clear that you understand you've made a mistake. However, once you have apologized briefly, you should immediately head to the next step, which is correct. Once you've acknowledged your error, immediately use the correct pronoun. So this step is also very quick and nothing further is needed other than the correction. So ang last na step is ang move on. Lastly, but just as importantly as the previous steps, once you have apologized and corrected the situation, you cannot move on from it right. You can move on from it right away. So there's no discussion or processing about the issue needed. Just continue with the conversation right where it left off and let everyone digest what happened without further commentary. So we can use this acronym or wait back. Okay, thank you. We can use this acronym or ang ACM method to help people remember how to respond in a situation where they have accidentally used incorrect pronouns and or misgendered someone. So, before kita mag-proceed sa next nga trend, I would love to know what would you like someone to address you using this pronouns. So, pwede ka mo guys comment or i-chat nyo ang inyo nga gusto nga pronouns nga i-address sa inyo sang iba na tao. Yay! Oh, bugs. Siya naman include.
Hello, may trend na mo. Sorry, I would like to comment on the new pronouns. Cause, yeah, so besides that, so, progressive people, especially there on the west coast of America. So, besides that, so amula na ang ginapakita nila. But on TikTok, like you see their Gen Zs, they put on TikTok what their preferred pronouns is. So some of their preferred pronouns are bug self. So they identify as bugs. Ewan ko. Basta, so like sa ako lang, where do we draw the line between what is considered to be respected as their pronouns and what is considered to be like, lain na siya. So like for example, may iba man gani, they identify as fae, kay fairy, self, something like that. My them gani, as in demon self. So if you look at it, like You can search that actually on YouTube, on TikTok, you can find that. So like, where do we draw the line sa respected pronouns naton? And even gani, like, the funny thing is, even gani, the New York Times, the one of the journalists, they identified, sila na mismo nag-assign sang gender ni God. So, gimutang nila they, them, kuno si God, which is like, okay, so, sa akon, wrong. Like, if that's on the English language side, be, if you look at our culture, sa Tagalog, sa Ilonggo, anong pronouns na ginagamit naton? 'Di ba? It's not gendered. So, mag-isip kayo, 'di ba? Siya, kita, ano pa gid? Ikaw, ako, 'di ba? So,
Sila.
it in our language mismo, it's already gender neutral. So like this view is mainly on the English language, on the Western side. So, kumbaga, that's why even some even proposed Philippines. So, which is a proper noun na siya. Proper noun na, di ba, kayo that is being used in America mismo. Sa Amerika lang na ginagamit. Kay, when you go here, Filipinos will not use Philippines. Kay, sa aton nga mindset, Filipino is already a gender neutral. That's why sang nagpost ang Disney sang Hello Latinx, ang mga tudod ng mga Latino kag Latina gina-quote retweet nila ang Disney nga why na naman niya ginagamit ang Latinx do mo nang ilagi na So most of this is being shared by people who are in Twitter. Okay, so, and you know naman, ang aton nga society today, the quote-unquote moral light bringers are the influencers with blue check marks on Twitter. So, I hope you can see my point of view. Why is it that, for them, misgendering is very, like a committed sin. Kumbaga, kung nag-misgender ka, they will persecute you. So, amo lang yun ang ako nga point of view. Like, if we adapt that way here in the Philippines, I think it doesn't make sense in our culture. Kay in our language pa lang mismo, gender neutral na ang mga terms ta. And yeah, that's why man, like for example, sa Korea, like, lain malaylay nga language, di ba? May oppa, may pa gani ang 'di bang kuya, ang sister or brother nila, do lain ang ila, the way language works sa ila lain man. So this one is very culture specific gid sa America. So amo lang ginang akon nga gusto ipahiwatig sa inyo. And yeah, actually you can kumbaga subong ang trend subong padamo-damo pronouns. So and yeah, so and people on TikTok will do that. Diba? So, ang ako yung preferred pronouns besides they, them, she, her, amo na, bug, self, them, on self. So, depende. So, like, may iban gani nga ga-identify as, amo na animal sila ya. So, where do we draw the line? Between what is considered normal sexuality and nga pagka-intindi ta and not, 'di ba? So sa DSM-5 gani, 'di ba? We have the diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So in some countries, before you are able to transition to another gender, kailangan kaanay i-diagnose with gender dysphoria. Okay? So others wala, hindi na kailanlan. So amo pa ginaang do mga some issues there. So maybe kay usually 10 years na ang before i-revise liwat ang DSM. So maybe since the DSM is also very political, wala kita kabalo what will happen in 2023 or 2022 or in the coming years nga i-revise ng DSM kung i-include man gyapon nila ang gender dysphoria kag hindi. So mo pagina ang mga ang mga sa kinks bala naton. 'Di ba? What is considered 'di ba sa sexual disorders naton sa mga paraphilias, 'di ba may mga sadistic disorder, 'di ba? May masochistic disorder, may syempre amo na yung considered nga ano. Pero ang duwa na bala. So what do we considered as normal and what do we considered as abnormal? So amo pa gina ang mga some contentions there, some arguments there that that is being challenged here sa gender and sexuality. Okay? So sa akon lang nga perspective, we must think of this as different perspectives. Okay? It's not the entire truth, ha? So this gender fluid nga perspective, so amo ning ilaya nga perspective na gender ka is fluid, so you can change gender, you can identify as another gender kung saan mo gusto, do mo na. So ang question gani, how many times should you come out pagid? So those are some questions in gender and sexuality that are being discussed more. So, amo lang na ang mamal ko, let's keep an open mind. Okay? So, I respect man kung anong inyo nga gina-identify as with, pero you must also know that there are people, di ba, who will still stick with their beliefs. And, ang about sa misgendering, 'di ba? So in first class, 'di ba? Hindi man naton alangan nga miara gina sila ID nga gubutang okay amo ni akong preferred pronouns everyday, 'di ba? Hindi ta na madala, 'di ba? So kumaga it will really go nga ma-misgender mo gid ya ang isa ka tawo kay wala na nila ginadala ang kumbaga identification card nila, 'di ba? Literally everyday, 'di ba? So yeah, so at least okay man ni, but just to apologize ang ACM, pero just to let you know that there are really some people that will really stick to what they believe in, and hindi ganyan nila, they will not really use your preferred pronouns because of what they believe in, and yeah. And amo na kag given man, at least you know I know amo nang loophole gani nga sa Filipino language wala man sang gender, so hindi taman ka ma-misgender kung magamit ko sang Filipino or Ilonggo nga language, 'di ba? So amo na that's what I can comment on that, especially on the neo pronouns nga trend. So okay. I hope you get my point, kid. I hope you get my point. So, America is getting radical, very, very radicalized every day. And, kumbaga, para sila very sensitive nga topic ang gender and sexuality. But, sa ako lang, I'm not here to dictate sa inyo kung ano dapat ang thinking ninyo, what perspective you should subscribe to. My point is like just like every day kung nga ginahambal, be careful lang gid sa mga ideologies, sa mga perspectives na ginasubscribe ninyo. Try to look at it a little with the magnifying lens. Try to scrutinize it. Just like what we do man sa TOP, di ba? Ga-criticize gani kita sa mga theories. Because theories are also different perspectives of what a personality is. So same man siya gender. So damo man perspective. So sa aton lang, let's keep an open mind. Try to scrutinize, try to look into the different points of view. Okay? And I'm not here to dictate sa inyo kung ano dapat ang inyo nga i-subscribe nga ideology. So I'm giving you the power to think critically gid, because sang una amo makuna very idealistic, very into social justice. Something like that. But my perspective change. Okay, my perspective change because I look into it more deeply. So kamo, that's my only take. Kamo, research nyo more about it. Those different perspectives, those different two contentions, and try to discuss. Okay, try to discuss good. Because not only in the internet, but also outside, talk to people good. Talk to people who have a different perspective than you. Okay? So, how can we learn more about the human nature if sa internet lang kita mag-talk? So, of course, internet is amo nang do kalain sa Pinoy, kung wala sila argument, trash talk na lang. So, learn kita how to make our point across, not only in the internet, but also outside. And really, talk to people because kita, as psychologists, we are there to empathize. And like I said, empathy goes both ways. So, not only ang tao nga may different perspective, ang i-empathize mo, dapat man ang tao nga ginatalk mo, ma-empathize man sa imong nga point of view. Okay? Sige. Sige, you may proceed. Sorry, Gid.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-mm.
So next is next be. Okay. Thank you. So next is the social expectation based on gender. So, despite the fact that women have great responsibilities within the Filipino family, they do not have any power when it comes to decision making. Men are considered a stronger gender, they have the power, thus confirming gender inequalities. A lot of mothers are submissive, dependent, and helpless. We all know that a Filipino family practice ang traditions wherein ng mga babae can only be seen usually in their respective homes only, taking care of their children, doing household, and etc. So meanwhile, ang men, though gatan gid siya to work hard or to go out gid to sustain their families, to sustain their family needs. So Filipinos are defined by their sex and then assume that gender role. The women are not always what we call frilly or girly because they may be tomboys, but they still have that less dominating role in their society. Men, on the other hand, are categorized into more dominating roles in society. They are defined as being more confident, accomplished, and well-rounded individuals. So despite of their gender, Filipinos tend to acknowledge gyapon gina-acknowledge gyapon nila ang sa sex. So men as powerful and strong individuals, meanwhile female as less dominating gid kag more on submissive sila sa mga men. Next is same-sex family. So, ang same-sex family is composed of homosexual couple and their children. So, there's been a lot of studies on how children in gay or lesbian families do. So, most studies show that children with two parents do as well as children with one parent. In fact, one study showed that children raised by same-sex parents had similar emotional, social, and academic outcomes as children raised by heterosexual parents. So sa theory naman niya, ang mga same-sex attracted people create families in variety of ways man, including like conception or adoption. Kag just some examples man sang same-sex parented families are a single lesbian woman who has children from a previous heterosexual relationship, a co-parenting arrangement between a lesbian couple and a gay male couple, or a gay male couple having children through surrogacy, and bisexual man having children with a heterosexual woman. So there are major issues man nga affect sa same-sex parental family. So first is the lesbian and gay parental families may have concerns about discrimination in parenting and custody arrangement. In short, may ara gyapon sang discrimination nga matabo when it comes sa parenting and custody arrangements. So next is the many co-parenting and blended family complexities present for heterosexual parents can also be present for same-sex parents, with the additional complexities of discrimination, stereotypes, and assumptions. Pareho lang man, may tendency man nga magpareho ang experiences nila together with the heterosexual couple, except lang nga mas grabe lang ya ang discrimination, stereotyping, and assumption sa mga same-sex families gid. And lastly, ang explaining relationship status and family makeup to school professionals, medical professionals, children's friends, parents, as well as explaining relationship status and family makeup to children can be uniquely complex for same-sex parents. So this kind of situation or setup is complicated to explain since others do not understand ang situation sa mga same-sex couple. And next is the bakla identity. So bakla is a Tagalog word that denotes the Filipino practice of male cross-dressing, denoting a man that has feminine mannerism, dresses as a sexy woman, or identifies as a woman. So it is an identity built on performative cultural practice more so than sexuality. So often considered a Filipino third gender, bakla can be either homosexual or heterosexual and are regarded as one of the most visible LGBTQA+ cultures sa Asia man. Kag even today, many bakla in the Philippines retain high status as entertainers and media personalities. Kag mas makita taman na siya sa Philippine show business nga ang popular gid nga bakla there sa Philippines is si Vice Ganda, which is ga makita siya sa TV nga ga influence man, and also ga joke sa TV, and also hindi man familiar man kita kanday Aura Bergela and Mimia nga ga cross-dress man sila sa ila mga social media platform. And lastly, men in the Philippines are expected to be masculine providers for their families and often seem unaffectionate in front of their loved ones, yet there exists an accepted subculture for men in which they can act effeminate, have relationship with men, and in some cases even dress as a woman. So in simple terms, ang effeminate means having a feminine quality or not manly in appearance or having behaviors or mannerism considered as unmasculine. So next. So the next reporter is Mr. J.F. David, in which he will discuss the Pride March, gender situation in the Philippines, and so. Okay.
Hello everyone! So, bugtaw pa kamo da. Gusto niyo magdaog ang Gcash? Same, gusto ko man. Wala man ako paano sa games, guys. Anyway. So let's go with the Pride March. So the first Pride March that Filipinos made history was on June 26, 1994, through Pro-Gay Philippines, or the Progressive Organization of Gays in the Philippines. So Filipinos took the streets to fight for their rights against discrimination, even dubbing it as Stonewall Manila, or as Pride Revolution. And to give you some background about the Stonewall riots and on how the Pride March came into picture. So the Stonewall riots were a series of spontaneous demonstrations by members of gay community in response to police raid that began in early morning hours of June 28, 1969 at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village neighborhood of New York City, USA. So a year after that, the pricing, damo nga nag riot kasi gina-harass sila ang mga gay people sa mismo community nila, which is open sa gay. So, damo nga nag-riot sa to. And then after that, to mark the anniversary, on June 28, 1970, the first gay pride marches took place in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco. So it served as safe spaces for people to express themselves freely and show their creativity, which is why you'll see many individuals coming in their own personal style expression, whether in drag or rainbow color tutu. That's the reason why very celebratory ang Pride March. This year, reiterating that Pride celebration is a protest. Again, ang Pride March, guys, is a protest. The Metro Manila Pride, or MMP, staged various online activities to bring attention to the rising cases of LGBTQ plus discrimination and human rights violations during the pandemic. MMP is the Southeast Asia's largest Pride festival. With its 2021 theme, Sulong Backlash, Sama-samang Pag-aklas ang ating lunas. MMP highlighted the calls for gender equality and intersectional solidarity through their initiatives during Pride Month. It only shows na kahit nasa pandemya tayo, patuloy pa din ang pagtawag ng LGBTQIA++ community para sa LGBT rights and human rights at gender equality. Next, we have gender situation in the Philippines. So the Philippines remains the top country in Asia and 16th in the world in terms of closing the gender gap according to the Global Gender Gap Report 2020 of the World Economic Forum. So kita ang first sa Asia and then pang 16th kita when it comes to the global. So the 2020 report shows that the Philippines remains strong in three of these four dimensions. As you can see, economic participation, opportunity, gender gap, ano pa ba? Basta nakita nyo yung screen, I can see it kasi. Um, the it has closed 80% of economic participation and opportunity gender gap, with women outnumbering men in senior and leadership roles, as well as professional and technical professions. We can see this, no, madamo ng mga tao sa ang mga women, ng mga seniors, mas damo ng mga boss women nga boss. And of course, ang leaders, no, damo ng mga babae nga leaders sa buong. Next, we have female life expectancy is 5 years longer than male, while the literacy rate is above 98% for both sexes. A larger percentage of women and girls are enrolled in tertiary and secondary education. Kung dati, wala ginapasugta ng mga girls nga mag college, subong tamo ng girls nga nag-excel sa education, no? Kaya isang una, 'di ba, we think that girls are only pambahay lang. So dapat mas balaan nila ang kung anong work sa sulod sang balay, and men can only be educated. So subong it's not that very discriminatory. From 41.6% in 2019, the political empowerment score is down by 6.3 percentage points to 35.3 in 2020. It only shows that slowly women are taking the spotlight that they truly deserve. Before, women were deprived of rights, especially in the working industry, education, and politics. Now we can see that women are starting to have their rights as they should. It graphically showcases samples of women's advancements in politics, academic, and professional excellence, and even legislation. But this is contrasted by images of prostituted women, battered wives, economically disadvantaged women, and exploited migrant workers. This put gender equality issues at the forefront of national discourse and precludes further downslide of women's status in the modern Philippine society. Yes, indeed, women are present in our society, pero hindi pa din hindi nito matatago ang mga pangit na side ng pagiging discriminated ng mga babae. Next, according to the UNDP and USAID report, LGBT plus Filipinos face challenges in employment and labor market on an individual level, and as members of community that is often subjected to discrimination and abuse. SOGI discrimination is hidden, and government agencies in charge of issues regarding SOGI discrimination do not report on LGBT discrimination. So puts the LGBT in a state of economic instability where they are either mismatched with the sector that they work in, or they have to sacrifice the performance of their gender identity and expression in order to avoid discrimination and to find a decent way of living. So damo nga mga LGBT plus community nga mga brothers and sisters ta nga they are at a disadvantage because of their gender lang. And among lesbians, gays, and bisexuals and transgenders, discrimination is strongly felt by transgenders the most, followed by lesbian and the gays, and lastly the bisexuals. Discrimination in employment on the labor market actually happens as a result of how one performs their gender identity and expressions. So just because of gender, the mga nasasayang ng mga skilled ng mga tao because lang they are judged by their gender. So we'll see after this kung is this still true in today's society. Next, the last topic na guys, this is SOGI. So I know you have heard about this, and I will try to give you the most brief explanation about the SOGI. So SOGI, according to Dr. Mohika, a dermatologist and a teacher that talks about sexuality and sexual health, SOGI is an acronym that stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So when we say SOGI, sa SOGI terms, ang SOGI, it could be feminine and masculine. Next, tandaan nga independent ang each SOGI term. And this could be put in a scale. I will show you mamaya kung anong scale. And everyone has sexuality, therefore everyone has their own SOGI. So don't come to me nga Soji is only for people that are lesbian and still don't know what their identity is. Hindi na ni para sa mga straight people, no. Kung alien ka base wala ka Soji, pero you are a person and you have your sexuality. So you have your own Soji. So let's talk about sex, baby. Sure. Sex is related to private parts or genitals. So kung sa chromosomes, we have XX, XY, XX, XY, or etc. We can also see this hormones, which is estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Pero ang pinaka visible nga evidence of sex is penis or vagina. So this is assigned by the doctors. Kung ano kikita ng doktor sa between your legs, that is your sex. It is either male or female. Males are called people with penises are called male, and then people with vagina are called female. Pero at some point, merong mga tao na nabubuhay na merong dalawang genitals. They are called intersex or hermaphrodite kung sa other terms. So may silang dalawang genitals. May ara ang mas dako ang ilang I can explain it. Hindi ko wala ko pa nakita kung ano gid man ang intersex, but may ara ang yes, they're a very rare, ma'am. That's true. Pero they still exist. Next we have gender. So gender is not equal to sex. So nakita natin to sa mga forms, di ba? It's either male or female then. So this is a role whether man or woman taught by society and culture. Gender is often based on sex. So I will ask you guys, no? Ikaw, ma'am, kung magkadto ka sa ma'am, sa birthday sa kapitbahay niyo, ma'am. And then nabalaan mo nga may penis ang baby. Anong ihatag mga gifts? Not including ang kwarta kag food. Pero for example, toys, anong ihatag mo sa iya, ma'am?
Siguro mahatag ko yung needs ng bata, yung mga bibiro. Mga bimpo, muna yung ako siguro ya. Pero, I think man, di ba, siguro man, you are going to ask me what color, di ba?
Yes.
So, color, isang gender and sexuality ko nga teacher sa masteral, color is, wala na iya gender assignment. Kita lang na iya ga-assign sang color culturally. In our culture, ginaya. And, we can't help man to give out, syempre, it's the parents' decision man, di ba, kung i-raise nila ang bata nila as a boy or a girl. So, syempre, if the parents butang da nga birthday boy, syempre, the person who will buy the gift will really assume nga boy siya. Okay? So, it's not the responsibility man of the person. Syempre, kid na siya mo. When do we know kung saan ga-awaken ang sexuality sang bata? When do we know nga saan mahambal naton nga amuning gender identity sang bata? Diba? Amo pa ginang mga one of the contentions, especially on the transgender nga movement. So, if you know lang nga in some countries, okay, once for example in Canada, for example, a bata as young as 5, 7, 6, diba? Kung, for example, nag-identify ang bata nga, okay, I'm a girl, but ang iyang sex is boy, diba? So, and for example, if the parents will not raise the child kung anong iyang identity, kwaon sang state ang bata. So, kumbaga, that's one of the laws there in Canada, if you know. So, kumaga ginakwaan na ang rights ng parents to raise the children because of that contention. So, where do we draw the line gani? So, tama man, gender is not equal to sex, but question number 1, what are the studies that prove nga when does the child identify as something, diba? Ara man nasa website ta, but let's look further pag mga latest studies regarding that, because that also affects the laws that are being passed. Sorry kung
Yes.
ano ko,
Yeah.
gagwa ko. Pero amo na, it's not, kumbaga, it's not my responsibility man to assume kung anong ibakal ko nga toy. Syempre kay kung ano man ang invitation sang parents nga amuning birthday kag boy ang iya bata. Siya syempre I will buy man toys that siguro educational na lang nga toys kung gusto nyo gender
Yes.
neutral, di ba? Kung amo gina ang contention, kung amo gina ang issue, di ba? So like sometimes people really make that as a big issue. Maybe it will be a big issue in when once the child become an adult, but sometimes as simple as that balalo, like nagiging very political ang gift lang gina, di ba? So like so ask mo man ng parents kung anong preferred gifts na lang nila kaysa or preferred
Yes,
gifts
yes.
ang
True.
bata, 'di ba? So amo na. So, that's my
Thank you,
question.
ma'am.
That's my answer.
Alright, so moving on, we have gender identity. So in contrast to what we hear from other people, gender identity is based on what we think and what we feel. So we have gender identity categories. So we have when your gender identity matches with the sex, you are called cisgender. So kung feeling mo lalaki ka and what you feel is lalaki ka din and nagmamatch sa sex mo, then you are cisgender. When we say transgender naman, kabaliktaran. So for example, kung ikaw babae, tapos nafe-feel mo na lalaki ka at iisip mo din na lalaki ka, then you are transgender. And under that, we have trans woman. Yun yung sinasabi ko, na may penis ka, pero you think as woman, you are trans woman. Whereas sa trans man, kung kung babae ka tapos may vagina ka tapos naisip mo na lalaki ka, then you are trans man. Here's a questioning unsure of gender identity. So usually ang questioning is nangyayari siya sa during the developmental stage din, sa adolescence part, no, na madaming teenagers na nagkakaroon ng identity crisis din. So they are not certain kung ano ba talaga yung gender identity nila. And this is not only limited sa part na yon ng pag-growth natin. Sometimes merong tao na late na sa kanilang life na realize na iba pala yung gender identity nila. For example, si Caitlyn Jenner, do you recognize her? Siya ay isang magaling siya sa sports, di ba? Yun lang yung alam
He
ko. And
was
then,
formerly an athlete.
yes, athlete po siya. And then, huli na niya na-realize na she is a trans woman. And then, nag-come out lang siya kung saan medyo late na talaga. Kasi medyo busy din kasi siya eh. So, kung hindi niya na iniisip yung sarili niya, kasi nasa sports lang iniisip niya. And then, kaya nasa questioning stage pa din siya sa lagay na yon. So, may own pacing tayong lahat-lahat. So, ganun. Next, we have queer, gender, fluid, and non-binary. So, manness or womanness does not play a vital role in their everyday lives. So, para sa kanila, wala silang pakialam kung ano yung label nila. Whether it is man or woman, wala silang pakialam. And then, we need to respect them kasi kung ano man yung nila, identity na, then that is it. Next, we have gender expression. So, na-discuss na ni Milan to kanina. But to reiterate, gender expression this is how you present yourself to others on how you identify. So, it's either through behavior, the way you speak, and the way you dress. So, for example, kung mahilig ka sa pants at polo shirt, suit and tie, and barong, your gender expression is masculine. And kung brusko ka magsalita and kumilos, masculine ka. Next, if mahilig ka sa pink, dresses, flowery stuff, mahinin at matinis ang boses mo, feminine naman yung gender expression mo. Pero meron din tayo tinatawag na noon na unisex or ngayon is androgynous expression. So for example, simple t-shirt and maong na pants. Pwedeng suotin ng both ng sexes, whether male or female, di ba? So that's it about sa gender expression. Next, we have sexual orientation. We have this is a person's identity in relation to their gender that they are attracted to, related to our feelings. So, kanino ka ba kinikilig? Kanino ka nagmamahal? So, when we say, kung ikaw ay attracted sa opposite gender, kung ikaw lalaki at attracted ka sa babae, you are heterosexual. Kung ikaw naman ay lalaki at attracted ka sa lalaki, you are gay. In contrast naman sa lesbian, kung babae ka at attracted ka sa babae, you are lesbian. Bisexual is both attracted to the men and women. And it doesn't mean na, for example, kung bisexual ka, pero puro lalaki lang yung nagiging karelasyon mo, tapos sinabi niyang bisexual ka, then it's okay. Kasi di ba may scale nga tayo. It's either may madness and, may masculine and feminine side tayo. So kung na-identify niyo yung sarili niya ng bisexual, then it's okay. Next, paano naman kung lahat ng gender, lahat ng type ng gender is gusto niya? That is called pansexual. Pero meron din na tao na wala talaga silang pake sa sexual activities nila, hindi nila nafe-feel yun. They are called asexual. So according to the LGBT plus organization and the first world countries, the term homosexual is not advised to use since it is sometimes used by others as a derogatory term. It is better to address it as heterosexual, gay, or lesbian. So mas mabuti na straight na lang talaga yung sabihin natin na it's heterosexual, gay, or lesbian, or other orientation. Next, lastly, we have sexual behavior. Sexual behavior is an act, and again, independent of sexual orientation or identity. It is not a scale like SOGI. It is only answerable by yes or no. So, or do you do it or not? When we say homosexual sex, you are having sex with opposite sex. Kung you are having sex with female naman, with another female, if you're female and you're having sex with another female, it is called FSF. And then pag ikaw lalaki at nakikipag-sex ka sa kapwa mo lalaki, it is called MSM. Okay, so cisgender male can have casual sex with another male and can still be straight. Okay, so whether it is just for fun or trip lang, or it's a job o as a sex worker, kung sa tingin mo is lalaki ka talaga, tapos nakipag-sex ka sa kapwa mo lalaki, it doesn't mean na bakla ka na. Okay, so it's just purely yun lang talaga yung sexual behavior mo, kasi di ba again independent siya kung ano yung orientation mo. So yes, but in curiosity, ma'am, kung curious ka lang talaga na i-try yung sa kapwa mo, and then that's it. Pero kung straight ka pa din, then you're straight. So as you can see, indeed it is a skill. As you can see, it could be on more masculine or feminine side. So remember when a video of Bimbi, yung anak ni Chris Aquino, na tumatawa in a high-pitched voice, so while he's covering his mouth, and then it went viral, di ba? Ang daming mga tao, mga friends ko na minamock yung video na yun, kasi the way Bimbi behaved. So the worst part is, the video was followed by another vlog where Chris Aquino was asking Bimbi about his sexuality or his identity. And Bimbi did answer it, and he said that he is straight and he likes girls. So it doesn't mean na kapag medyo masculine ang gawi or gender expression ng isang babae, tomboy na siya. The same with boys, na if medyo feminine siya mag-behave, yung pananalita niya medyo mahinhin, bakla na siya agad. That's toxic femininity and toxic masculinity. Hindi pwedeng i-box out natin yung ganun na lang na pag-iisip. Also, huwag kang desisyon sa buhay ng ibang tao. You do not have the right to out someone. Coming out is a precious moment for someone who needs it. You can ask a person about their identity if and only if they feel comfortable disclosing it to you. Let them be. Hindi naman siguro nakaka-apekto yung identity nila sa buhay mo, di ba? And also, avoid saying na, uy, meron naman akong mga friends na LGBT eh. Pero, again, LGBT rights is human rights. A true LGBT ally understands, recognizes, and supports the rights that not just heterosexual deserves, but also as well as our brothers and sisters from the LGBTQIA++ community. Wala dapat, pero kung kaibigan mo sila, susuportahan mo sila dahil mahal mo sila. Humans are complicated beings. We cannot put ourselves into a box with just two categories. The World Health Organization and United Nations have already acknowledged the existence of LGBTQIA+. Being an LGBT is not a disease that needs a cure and in fact is a part of normality in sexuality. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association, APA, removed the diagnosis of homosexuality from the second edition of its Diagnostic Statistical Manual or DSM. After comparing competing theories, those that pathologized homosexuality and those that viewed it as normal. So dumaog ang normal. And as the world progressed and changed, sabi nga ni Ma'am Wong yesterday, what we believe, what is true before, could change today. We should open our hearts and mind and accept that we are born uniquely and differently, like a spectrum of colors. Mas nakakapagod ang magalit sa walang kasalanan kaysa sa magmahal ng may bukas na pananaw. Love will always win. And that concludes our report for today about the psychology of gender and sexuality. I hope you discovered the you in you. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Group 4, for a very comprehensive report about the psychology of gender and sexuality. So usually in some schools, Gidman, they really have a subject that is really tackling about gender and sexuality, no? But in my case, nakakuha ko siya in my master's degree sa Lasal. There kami nag-talk about gender and sexuality, gid. And yeah, and some few questions na lang before we go siguro. So, what are some of the things that you have learned while you were researching about your topic? Mga new things na na-discover nyo or mga old conceptions ninyo about gender and sexuality nga na-discover ninyo nga false or para sa inyo false or wrong gali nga thinking while you were researching. Okay?
I'd
Sige,
like
sige,
to go
Miss
first.
Milen.
As discussed, ma'am, by JF, usually ang common misconceptions is when we're having a, like, as he mentioned, nga if you are male and then nakipag-sex ka sa kapwa mo male, then nag-assume na ang society or most of us nga gay ka. But it is just a gender behavior and does not really conclude about your gender identity or sexual orientation, ma'am.
Okay, sige. How about your other group mates? Sige, Miss Colorado?
Ako ma'am, subong ko lang na-discover nga may unsexual gali. So, ang sexual gali, ma'am, wala sa gapili ko na gender, male or female, pero more siya ga-inlove siya sa personality. So, hindi gid mapaktan if may love ka sa laki, pagka next day gusto mo naman sa baye. So, there's a lot of realization during sang pag-search naman. Also, ang mga children, gali, ang mga age nila, kung saan maka-start na sila, differentiate male kag female. And for me, while researching, para sa akon, ang gender stereotypes is therefore destructive and hinder women and men's opportunity to develop their own interests tungod sa gender stereotype. But it's really great nga damo na nagbago since before, mas open na ang society. Also, gina-recognize na ang mga LGBT, mga different gender. So, naman.
Okay, okay. Sige, any more? Who would like to answer?
Ako po, ma'am.
Sige, sige, JF. And next is si
For-
Shaila.
Yes. For me po, na-realize ko man nga in the society, it still exists, no, ang gender discrimination. And slowly, gina-try tang i-adapt na. For example, ang ginahambal natin nga gay-friendly na ang Philippines. But the truth is, it is tolerated, but it's not accepted. So, actually, dapat may SOGI equality bill pa kami nga i-discuss. But it was too long pagid. And I realized there nga, damo pagid kita nga ihabol ang Philippines when it comes to gender equality. Nga, kasi may ara gid nga tao nga damo sila skills, but they are not given the chances just because of their gender. So I hope nga mas mag-progress pa kita, maging better citizens, and just to love each other and respect nga kung ano man ang ginapili natin nga tahakon sa life.
Okay, Shaina, you have anything to ano?
So, ang ako lang, ma'am, is that gender should not matter when dealing with people. So, you should treat them with equal kindness, man. Kay kag everyone deserve gid ang kindness, and also everyone deserves to have freedom, to be loved, to be respected, and being in the LGBTQA plus community should not deprive someone of this, man. Kag also na-realize ko nga at the end of the day, we're all humans and we are not entitled to judge or degrade them based on their gender, ma'am. Wala na ako.
Okay, sige. From the class, do you have any questions nga pwede nyo ma-ask sa Basta may mga some things ka mga para sa inyo vague pa that the presenters might answer. I think that's good man nga wala. But okay, sige. So, yeah, just to add on of my few takeaways man kagina dito about mga new trends about it. So, yeah, so just be careful lang gid on the ideologies that are coming out. Try to look at it with scrutinize it if you want to. Also, amo pa gina, so G bill will go pa dugay-dugay pa na siguro until nga mapas, because in the first place, consider nyo man gapon ang aton nga culture and our constitution mismo. So, unlike in America, they have a different constitution. That's why it's easier for them to pass that same-sex marriage law. Okay? Sa aton, especially the SOGI, there are really more considerations to look into, and hindi lang kita basta-basta accept dahil kung ano ang ginabutang dara sa law nga na, because even though we must also ensure nga hindi lang ang minority will get equal treatment gani, but everyone gid. So one of the considerations siguro ang especially gid on the aspect of religious freedom, because once, for example, one of the components there sa SOGI Bill B is, for example, what if there is a person who is in the LGBT community will go to a certain church, and then what if ang sermon is about against homosexuality. Okay? So, hindi lang na sa Christianity nga religion ha, may Islam pa. Okay? So, sa Islam, bawal man na sa ila, di ba? So, there are those factors that we really need to consider before anay ipas ang amo na nga law, because a good law is a law that is specific and it's not vague when it comes to their the written nga ginabutang na. So amo lang na, I'm just kumaga, I don't want to criticize the person, I criticize the issue mismo, the way we discourse about the way we talk about gender and sexuality. Amo na nga ako nga mostly nga gina-criticize dara. So yeah, so amo na. So first na sa gahambal ko sa Canada, you lose the right to parent your child. So some people will say I deserve na sang parent nga kwaon ang bata sang state. Kung ang state ang mapadako sang bata mo, di ba? Ara man siya gapon sa foster care system, di ba? And we know naman nga more and more children are there. And another issue is, amo na, kay once be for example nga, paano tamambalaan nga ang bata, tabi for example is transgender or hindi, kung nagplay lang siya bisang toy nga pang lalaki, can we assume that our baby girl is a boy na? Nung mga amo na ba some vague contentions, and in some laws nakasulat na especially in other countries. So, tapos, amo pa gina, so once for example, magkadto sila sa therapist, and the therapist will say nga, puberty blockers na siya. When you say puberty blockers, they will they will let the child take a hormone pill that will stop puberty. So nga up until the age of, for example nga 13 or ano siya nga, once nga balaan niya na kung sino siya, didto ta na start transition ng iya nga mga hormones, diba? So some things that really need to be considered man ang mga amuna nga mga aspects. And yeah, just be careful lang gid of too much identity politics, because if you know naman sa Hollywood and all, everything is about race, everything is about gender. So that's what really divides America right now. So too much of that. And makita nyo man nga kumbaga ang criticism ko sa mga companies gani, especially sa mga entertainment companies, like for example sa Disney, for example, they have the new movie, di ba, nga Eternals, and people clap for it for its diversity and inclusion. But if really the company is advocating for that, why is it that they will delete the gay kissing scene sa mga countries that do not allow it, if they are really truly for social justice, 'di ba? So ang wala nang mahambal ko sa inyo nga, just be careful of mga ideologies that kumbaga, don't let an ideology run your life, gid. And amo na, it just be open to people lang, gid. Listen to them. Talk to them, gid, ya, as in outside of the internet conversation, because internet is internet. Okay, so we can never truly know who the person is unless we talk to them, gid, ya, and have an open mind with them. Okay, so wala na mga takeaways ko. So let me check na lang your attendance. So sorry gid for the delays and all that. Okay, wait lang ha. Alright, okay.